that we're all going through together. Again, Doug Mitchell here at the Conservancy in Columbia Falls. And for our first donor thank you event, we're starting off with one of my very favorite people and one of my very favorite projects, which is really a symbol of this continuing work that we're doing over a number of years with the park, with landmark pieces of work, doing big things. And 3 years ago, the Washington State University came to us with a really exciting idea, which is let's get together and let's think about how we would implement a really landmark lynx study to study the population and movement of lynx in the southern border of their population here in Glacier National Park, something that had never been done before. And they introduced us to Alissa Anderson, who is a biologist and getting her master's at Montana State University. She has had experience here in Montana, and I'm going to briefly share my screen because I have my favorite picture of Alissa loaded up from her time in the Swan. And yet that really is Alissa letting a wolverine out of a bag. So I think that's really an incredible thing. Alissa worked for a number of years, or for some time in the Swan, with the Swan Valley Connection. And now the group she's with, in a name that only a scientist and educator can like, with the Mammal Spatial Ecology and Conservation Lab at Washington State University. So hey, Alissa, thank you for joining us tonight. It's a treat. She's in the other room. We're socially distanced by 2 doors, but she is also here in the Columbia Falls office. Alissa, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Doug. And I can't help myself as a biologist. I have to tell you that was a fisher, not a wolverine.
Oh, a fisher. Okay, good. Thank you.
In Idaho, because we actually don't have them in the Swan anymore.
But we do have wolverines in the Swan.
We do. We have a lot.
Yes. Okay,
Yep.
There you go.
Fisher is another cool animal.
Yeah, that's awesome. So this is year 2 of a 3-year project, right? So we're going to be back at this again next year. You had 132, 134 camera traps last year. So you're going to be able to share some of the year 2 information with us. How is this year going for you, in particular, with the park being half kind of closed?
You know, it's been going good, but now that we're, you know, through June was a little stressful, and May and everything up to that. But you know, now that things are kind of figured out, we know what we can do and where we can go, everything's been going pretty well. Yeah. And
about how many traps do you have out this year?
I think 170 about.
And are they in similar areas to where you put them last year? Did you have some learnings from last year that educated where you wanted to put your camera traps this year?
Yeah, and I'll kind of go into more detail on that, but you know, we want to survey kind of all of Glacier at some point, and there are a couple areas that we are resurveying this year for sort of 2 different reasons that I'll talk about.
Great. Alyssa's going to give us a little presentation here. And as folks have questions, feel free again to put those in the chat, and then we'll have some time at the end. We'll spend about an hour together. It's a real treat to have Alissa kind of come out of the field and spend the evening with us here at the Conservancy. And again, none of this would be possible without your generous support as donors. And we really appreciate the fact that we've been able to fund these first 2 years of the project. We've committed to funding year 3 of the project next year, so you'll see more of Alissa and getting this across the finish line, because it's such an important part of what we do at the Conservancy, and we can only do it with your help. You know, it's kind of about wildlife, wilderness, and wonder. I'd like to talk about, and this really is all 3. For me. So how did you, just give me, before I turn it over to you to go through a presentation, how did you decide that this was the project that you wanted to focus on for your academic career, for your master's?
I've been working in Northwest Montana for about 10 years as a wildlife technician, working for the Forest Service, FWP, various in Idaho as well. And this position, I just kind of heard about it, and it really sounded perfect for me, in that it's a project that is focusing on, a threatened species. It's something of conservation need. There's definitely a gap in our knowledge that can really help us actually improve conservation for this animal, first of all. And then second of all, I really like that this project uses non-invasive techniques. So, most studies of carnivores like lynx, that take place around here are, either you have to catch them and collar them, is one of the main ways that we learn about lynx. So I like that this study is non-invasive, we don't bother them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I started this Glacier book club, and our book for this month is Wolverine Way, right? And Chad does an amazing job in that book. But to your point, that's a very invasive process in which they actually captured a lot of lynx in that process as well. And it's amazing how technology has changed. John Waller talks a lot about that as they try to figure out how to get the first cameras kind of put out there. And we've talked a little bit, and Alissa did a great program for us in Spokane that was very, very popular. And you talked a little bit about how we're not quite 100% of the way there in terms of AI being able to let you turn over these, 600,000 photos you had last year, something in that range, and then just have AI do the work. This is still a manual process, right?
Well, we actually, we sorted all the images manually last year with the help of a lot of undergrads, to get them experience on their resumes. I did a lot too. But, we're going to AI. We're trying the AI this year. We've done some tests, and it is. So this is with Microsoft AI for Earth, I think they call it, and they actually are doing this for us for free right now, and for a lot of other camera trapping programs as they're training their AI. They're getting something out of it, and that they're training it, and it actually does work pretty dang good. So we're gonna be trying that this year and see how that goes.
That's exciting. That's fun. Well, Alissa has been kind enough to put together a little presentation for us tonight to give you some behind the scenes special access to year 2 study information, including some photographs. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Alissa. And again, thank you for sharing some time with our group tonight.
Great. Thanks for having me, Doug, and thanks everyone for being here. Okay. If you can believe it, I actually haven't used Zoom in like 3 months, so bear with me. All right. You guys can see my screen?
Yep.
Great. All right. Well, we'll get going here. So yeah, thanks again, Doug, for your introduction, and for everyone for being here on a Wednesday night, a beautiful Wednesday. At least it's beautiful in Montana. All right, I'm just gonna start off with some brief introduction on lynx and why we are doing this study in Glacier. So lynx are a specialist carnivore. They're evolved for deep, powdery snow environments. They have these really huge, furry feet that basically just act as snowshoes. And this enables them to just really float in these deep, powdery snow conditions and to catch their primary prey, the snowshoe hare, all winter in an environment where other predators just can't even compete, because they'd be sinking, like us, sinking up to their waists. So the contiguous US is the southernmost range edge for lynx populations. Habitat in the range edge for all species is naturally more fragmented. Naturally, there are lower prey populations, and so this increases the vulnerability to the species, to disturbance or to climate change in these areas. So lynx were listed as a threatened species in 2000, and not included in the original listing decision. Evidence now suggests that climate change does currently pose one of the greatest risks to lynx persistence in the contiguous US. And this is largely due to predictions of range-wide habitat contraction and fragmentation. Despite these potential impacts of climate change to lynx persistence, they are currently being considered for delisting from their threatened status. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has designated 6 critical habitat units for lynx populations in the contiguous U.S. Those are seen here in red. The Colorado one is actually that's an introduced population. Interesting. So there are no historic or current population estimates, but the Northern Rockies unit in Montana and Idaho is considered to likely have the largest lynx population right now, and also the best chance of population persistence into future climatic conditions due to climate change. So about 13% of this Northern Rockies unit is actually inside of Glacier National Park. So it's a pretty big chunk. And additionally, the east side of Glacier is likely an important corridor for immigration from source populations in Canada. And this is significant because genetic connectivity with these core populations is likely critical to continued survival of lynx populations in the contiguous US. So despite this sort of potentially precarious populations, potentially precarious continued existence in Glacier, wildlife managers lack really even basic baseline knowledge of lynx distribution or density across Glacier. And this really inhibits any ability to enact proactive, climate relevant management decisions into the future. So our project strives to fill these knowledge gaps and will be the first comprehensive survey of lynx distribution across all of Glacier. And we are going to accomplish this, like Doug said, using these passive camera traps that are deployed on trails. And this is a proven technique for surveying, elusive carnivore species, several kinds. So wildlife naturally travel on human trails just because it's easier, frankly, instead of crawling through a bunch of deadfall. And so by putting our cameras on trails, we can gather data on lynx presence without bothering them, or altering their daily lives. So our main objective to this study is to determine lynx occupancy across Glacier. And just like very basically, what this means is we'll produce a statistical model that will estimate what areas lynx live in across all of Glacier. And I'll be using these field survey methods that were developed by my advisor and another grad student at Washington State University that was first used to study lynx populations in Washington State, actually. So, okay, this is getting a little technical, but the way we design our study is we overlay 40 kilometer square hexagonal grids over our entire study area. So that red outline, that's the outline of Glacier there. And so this size, 40 kilometers, represents a conservative estimate for the female lynx home range size in the northwestern contiguous US. And we survey all the cells that have enough trail miles that we can place 4 cameras spaced at least 1 kilometer apart. So a little history. Yeah, Doug, you already kind of mentioned some of this, but in 2018, my advisor from Washington State University, Dan Thornton, and carnivore biologist at Glacier, John Waller, did a pilot study in the North Fork area to test these methods in Glacier and see if they wanted to pursue a full-blown study together. So they surveyed 8 cells, those circled in red there, and it worked. They documented a bunch of lynx, and they put in an application for funding with the Conservancy and received full funding with generous support from all the donors. And whoops. It was at this point that I joined the study as hired on as the master's student. So last summer, we started our first big push. We surveyed 30 cells. We hiked over 800 miles. And yeah, we got almost 600,000 images that we did sort through all by hand last year. So it'll be good to try the AI this year. My advanced just stopped working. This is exciting. All right, that'll work. We detected a bunch more lynx in several areas across the park, which is great to see. And then, one highlight being that we did detect one detection of a lynx with 2 kittens. So that was super exciting. It's just really important to show that they are reproducing. So here's some just initial results from 2018 and 2019. We did detect lynx 168 times. Many of these were probably the same individual, over and over again. So there's not necessarily 168 individual lynx, but we got that many, individual detections. So that was about a quarter of our cameras and about half of our cells got at least 1 lynx detection, which is pretty impressive. And that's over about 70 days being out there. And so, just take a minute and think about, how rare and elusive this species is. And, this is the part where I would typically ask you to raise your hand if you've ever seen the lynx in the wild. But it's kind of hard to do that. Oh, okay, I see 1. Oh my gosh, 2, wow. Okay, you guys, you're not supposed to have seen lynx, man. Just as an example, so I spent about the past 10 years recreating and working in the Northern Rockies, and I've seen, multiple mountain lions in the wild, and I've seen a wolverine in the wild, and wolves and all these critters, and I've never seen a lynx, so they're very elusive. So I guess, to me, this many lynx detections, I think shows that, these methods are working, and, to survey an elusive species, and we're on the right track for completing this first thorough snapshot of lynx occupancy across Glacier. So now we're at 2020. Dun, dun, dun. It's been an interesting year for sure. The good news is we received, another full year of funding from the Conservancy. And, the Park Service has really been very generous in working with us and still allowing us to do our research this year. So really, I'm just super thankful for everyone. It's, we're doing pretty good right now. Due to COVID, we chose to only survey areas that were accessible by day trip, to limit our impact on already short-staffed Park Service employees. So this summer, we're surveying 20 cells. So those are the purple cells there. We started setting cameras in early June, and we're actually currently in the beginning stages of pulling our cameras right now. We did receive administrative clearance from the Park Service to continue the work we had planned on the east side this year. And I just want to say that, we're not taking that privilege lightly at all. We're committed to following all of the Blackfeet, COVID prevention regulations while crossing their land and have to drive through, to access those sites. So that's something we take really seriously. So we don't have all the data back. There's still plenty of cameras out in the field, definitely not ready for analysis, but I can tell you from what I have seen, we've gotten a lot more lynx detections this year, both in areas that we expected to find lynx and in some areas that were somewhat unexpected. I was unexpected to see them there. So we have some really interesting data coming in to help us better understand lynx across Glacier. So the second objective that we are focusing on this year is to attempt to estimate lynx population density in a small portion of Glacier using camera sets to identify individual markings on their inner legs. Oops. So the methods for this aspect of the study are the same as for our occupancy, except for that we actually have cameras on both sides of the trails where we're doing this portion. And so this enables us to capture images of both sides of the lynx and thus, markings on both sides of an animal. Double camera sets capturing both sides of an animal, with unique markings is a proven technique for determining wild felid population density. It's been used on species like tigers and leopards, which of course have very obvious, stripes and spots. Canada Lynx, are only very lightly marked. So, there are no published studies using these techniques to look at lynx density. But some pilot work from another person in my lab from Washington State, suggests that it is possible to identify a subset of individuals by these markings on the inside of their front leg. It's really the only place that they have markings. So we're trying these techniques out in a couple areas this summer. So we are resurveying some areas, the Marias Pass area that we surveyed last summer and got a lot of lynx. And then some areas that we're surveying for the first time this summer, like Two Medicine area, that we expected to get a lot of lynx. So those areas that we're doing this density work is seen in red. And, we aren't sure if this aspect of the study is going to work. To be statistically sound, we have to have multiple people decide if they can, identify unique individuals, and we have to have enough lynx detections that are identifiable to individual to produce a statistically sound density estimate. So we'll see. I'm hopeful so far, and I'm just going to show you guys some examples of, what it looks like to see these different, animals that I think might be the same, and what that really looks like. So this picture here, this is a cat in Marias Pass area, and I can't unfortunately put my mouse over it to show you, but he's got these two, bars on his leg, and then a couple dots. The bottom dot is sort of the most bold, and then there's two dots on the sides here. Here's another picture. This is often our pictures look more like this. They're, they're often blurry. They're at dawn and dusk when the lighting isn't super good. I think I still see those two stripes and at least that one dot underneath. This is not as good of a picture for sure. Here's another one, again, a blurry picture, but I definitely see the two stripes and at least that one dot. The other dots, I see maybe one. And here's another one. I definitely see the lighting's a little better. Two stripes, one of them is almost hidden, and I can see all three dots here. So, kind of showing between these two. I think, these aren't the best pictures, but I do think that this is probably the same guy. And so here's a cat in the Two Medicine area, and this cat has the most markings. It has a ton going on. But so, here's what I think is that same cat. And it's interesting, the night pictures really, the spots pop a little more, but it's got like 3 bars and then a couple stripes. And, here's a different location, in Two Medicine. And again, there's especially those 2 bars, I guess you can really see. The bottom one is kind of lighter, and then some dots. So, it'll be interesting to see if we think this will work. It might not, but I think it's definitely worth trying because, especially with the threatened species that's potentially could be delisted, I think it'll be really important to have new methods to study population density if it does work. So I think it's worth trying. So yeah, kind of an additional question that we're interested in looking at is sort of this upside to COVID, and what ended up happening this season with the closure on the east side to visitors is this actually a super unique opportunity to study recreation impacts on wildlife activity in a truly experimental manner. By comparing data from the exact same camera location in a typical high summer with high levels, or excuse me, a typical summer where there's high levels of recreation, to 2020 when there's only a very few number of people on the east side, using admin clearance. We just have this really unique, once in a lifetime opportunity to actually look at the impacts of recreation on wildlife communities in an experimental manner, during the summertime, between June and August, in the exact same place. So, we are this summer redoing 21 camera locations on the east side. These are those red dots. And these are camera sites that we surveyed last summer, 2019. So we'll have comparison data from those sites. And then, if the east side does open to the public next summer, we could also resurvey some of the areas that we're surveying this time in Two Medicine or Cut Bank to have that comparable data. So yeah, we're interested if wildlife change their activity patterns potentially, are they active more at night if there's more people, or do they not care? As well as, if species actually are seen in those sites more frequently, are some species scared away from those sites when there's more people? or are some species actually around where more people are? You know, like some ungulates will use humans as predator shields. So we have a lot to look into. We don't know what we'll find, but it's a unique opportunity.
And your cameras are indiscriminate, right? So they're taking pictures of whatever comes in front of them. So in addition to your lynx specific information, you're going to have other species information as well that will be interesting.
Yes, precisely. Yeah. Just kind of a, you know, that's where we've been, that's where we are, and just sort of a quick what's next. Yeah, it's hard to believe I actually have to go back to school. My first class was actually yesterday. I was in the field, so I didn't attend, but you know, the plus side to everything being online is I could just watch the lecture today. So yeah, you know, this fall and winter, I need to sort all of our photos, you know, run some basic analysis, you know, determine if we think we should pursue this density estimate thing. And then, you know, well, next summer is our final field season for the whole project. It's our third and final field season. So, you know, we'll do that. And then I have one more academic year in order to, you know, complete all the data analysis and write up all the results, you know, so I can share them with everybody and publish them, and then hopefully graduate May 2022. So after this summer, we will have surveyed 58 cells across Glacier. You know, that leaves 21 cells left to complete the first thorough survey of lynx in Glacier. And so these orange cells are those remaining that have enough trail miles that we can fit the 4 cameras we need, spaced at least 1 kilometer apart, and in areas that are below tree line, right? Like there's some cells in there with enough trails, but they're like all above tree line, and it's not really where lynx live. And then also, you know, we can't really hang a camera without trees. So that's why some of those we're not surveying. Yeah, and then again, next summer, we hope to, if the park opens on the east side, resurvey some of those areas to get that comparison data with visitor use. So yeah, just like, you know, very timely, Doug. I think beyond lynx, a really cool aspect of using trail cameras is that we do capture tons of data on, you know, every other wildlife species, which can be used by park biologists for a number of other studies or monitoring work. So, you know, here's just some initial results. This is from the 2018 and 2019 data showing the number of detections of our most common carnivore and ungulate species. So, you know, top left, left to right, top to bottom. You know, it's kind of an interesting range with ungulates and bears being most common, you know, and then our smaller carnivores, and then our medium, and then our largest carnivores being least common, which is, you know, what you would expect if you think about, you know, the food pyramid, right? There's got to be a lot more prey than carnivores. Yeah, I guess, you know, to finish things off, I just want to share with you guys some of the highlight pictures that we've gotten this year. So these are all pictures freshly pulled from cameras. I've already shown off most of the best lynx pictures we've got this year throughout the presentation. So I'll focus now more on some of the other really cool species that we've picked up. And to start off, you know, in honor of Wolverine Way being your book club book, and I'm quite partial myself, start with the Wolverine. And kind of a fun side note, I showed this picture to Rick Yates, who's the biologist featured in that book. And he told me he thought it looked like a female to him, which I wouldn't be able to tell you that. Something about the face maybe, but I thought that's pretty cool. We've actually gotten a ton of Wolverine this year. It's been really interesting. I don't know if that, you know, means anything, but it's definitely really cool to see.
Oh, I forgot about the Lynx program. This is just the end of it.
And we get a lot of marten. We get a lot of marten. These guys, you know, they hardly ever sit still. Almost all of our pictures of them are blurry. So this, because they move so fast. This was a nice treat to get. You know, elk. It's a cool one. You can see is still in velvet. We got a couple bighorn sheep this year, which is pretty cool. amazingly, we got a lynx detection at this exact camera where we also got a sandhill crane, which is, pretty crazy. I just typically don't think of these species sharing habitat, but just goes to show nature always has to prove you wrong. There's an interesting one, that very large puddle formed in the middle of the trail here, and a hawk stopped to drink. You get a lot of coyotes, across most of the cameras. They like to show off sometimes. Wouldn't be a presentation about wildlife in Glacier without grizzly bears, of course. They like to give us some cheese shots. Lots of moose. I really think it's interesting how many moose there are in Glacier. They talk about how, the moose populations in Montana aren't doing super well, but there's just a ton of moose in Glacier. So that's something someone else could study. We get a lot of foxes, red fox. They're often nocturnal. We mostly get nighttime shots of them, so it's always a treat to get some good daytime shots of these guys. Mountain lions. This guy looks like he's been lifting weights or something. He's super buff. And this is a really unique thing where this cat just decided to take a little break right in front of one of our cameras. That's sometimes how I feel when I'm hiking. We get a lot of mountain goats, sometimes in places you wouldn't expect to see them. I think, they're crossing valleys or, traveling to the licks. So that's been pretty cool to see. They always look good. We've gotten a couple badger. It's actually one of the least common, species that we see on the cameras. So it's been good to get a couple of those this year. Even more rare, probably actually like probably the rarest mammal in Glacier, except maybe bog lemmings or some of the bat species are probably a little more rare, but is the porcupine. I think last year we only got 2 detections, and this year we've got, I think, 4 porcupine detections, all in really different areas. So it is kind of encouraging. Maybe their populations are starting to rebound, hopefully. And we can't have cool carnivores without prey species. So not to be overlooked, the Columbian ground squirrel here, the red tree squirrel. Got a bunch of wolves. They're interesting. They're the most wary. They often will see the cameras or smell our scent from when we knelt down to put up the cameras or whatever, and kind of stop and check it out before they walk by. They're super smart. Of course, the prey. There's a mule deer twins, their mom, super cute. And a white-tailed buck. Lots of black bears. I think black bears are, probably the most ubiquitous species we get. I mean, we get them on, I think, almost every single camera, which is, they're common, but it's really, I think it's impressive that they're able to survive and thrive in so many different places, and have young. It's a cub we got, so they're pretty cool. And then this is fun. This is the first time we've gotten a raccoon on camera in Glacier. Was this year. It was kind of interesting. This was up the North Fork, so not too far from the river, not too far from where there's cabins, which is kind of more their traditional habitat. We don't really see them in the mountains super frequently, but this was great to get a new species on our list this year. Yeah, I guess, and with that, I need to thank everyone at the Conservancy for all of their hard work and making this project happen, and same with the Park Service, all the employees at the Park Service, and then everyone at Washington State University and in my lab for helping make this possible. And then, thanks to all of you. I mean, it's crazy. Like this project just would never have happened, without the incredible, generous support from all the donors, both great and small. So thank you guys for all your dedication to scientific research in Glacier. And, I guess like personally, I mean, I've been living and working in Northwest Montana for a long time, pursuing, trying to pursue a career in wildlife, and just, felt incredibly lucky to be able to work on this project and move forward in my career. And I hope to contribute to, conservation in this area in the years to come. So yeah, again, thank you guys. And with that, I guess that's what I've got. If people have questions or
well, we feel incredibly lucky to have you at the helm, Alissa. You've been super great to work with, and to be able to share this time with us is really important. It's neat to be able to see the results of the projects that you work so hard to make happen, and many people in many different ways, from contributors to staff to people at the park, people at the university. So thank you for doing that. A couple of kind of questions that came in. I'll aggregate a couple of them from the chat. So take us back a little bit and give us a brief primer about the lynx. What are there certain habitats that are preferred by lynx? What kind of is the food source of the lynx? What's the difference between a lynx and a bobcat? Let's start there.
Yeah, so lynx, again, they are sort of a specialist carnivore. They tend to be places where there's more deep snow in the wintertime and cold snow. And then beyond that, they do have certain habitats that they prefer. And so it's kind of interesting because there's sort of a mix. There's, the sort of this old growth, spruce, Engelmann fir, what we think of as the boreal forest, that they really prefer. And then it's interesting because also, like, after a fire, about roughly 20 to 40 years after a fire, when you get that dog hair, what we call a dog hair lodgepole, it's just super thick. They also really like that habitat. And the reason why they like these habitats is because they are specialized predators to eat snowshoe hare. And so these are places that snowshoe hare like to be. The reason being that snowshoe hare, they need forage throughout the year. Even as snow levels go up and down, that really thick lodgepole pine, they still have access to pine needles, as the snow goes up and down, and places to hide. And that sort of subalpine fir, lodgepole pine, Engelmann spruce type habitat, there's often, kind of a different levels of trees, understory, and lots of logs and places for snowshoe hare to hide. And so that's kind of their habitat. And yeah, so bobcat, they're more a generalist species. They don't do super good in really deep snow. And so they tend to kind of be like bobcat. I can't think about the overlap, how much they do, but lynx typically are more in like Canada and Alaska, and bobcat are more like lower 48, and they overlap a little bit for sure. We actually have gotten very few pictures of bobcat. I think I just saw today the first picture of a bobcat this whole summer. I just got on a camera.
How do you tell them apart?
Oh, I wish I had those pictures. So the best way is their tail, actually. A lynx has a short tail, and it looks like it was dipped in a bottle of ink. So it's got a black tip all the way around, whereas a bobcat has a slightly longer tail, and it's actually white underneath. It does have black on the tip, but only on the top. Bobcat, they have shorter, legs. They have more spots. Bobcat have more black spots. They have smaller paws. Bobcat also have ear tufts and that little like face mane like lynx do. Lynxes will be much larger, especially if they're mature, but they do have that. They are really similar looking, for sure.
So tell us a little bit about is there something special about the ears? Is there a function to the hair and the shape?
Doug, that's a great question. I should probably know that.
Well, there's next year,
Yeah, right?
Next year. Maybe that's in the class you missed today.
Have you read up on that? There's probably something about, attenuating noise perfectly to their ears or something.
No, it was just one of the questions that came up, so I asked it.
Oh, that's great. See, now I have something I need to go learn. That's good.
Yeah, there you go. So you talked a little about the range for the female. Is there a differentiated range for the male, and is there an optimal breeding population size that would be sustainable?
Yeah, males, I think like most felids, I think typically males have a much larger range, home range than females do. A population, that's interesting. So Montana, like we are, as I said earlier, at the sort of natural range edge of lynx. They're just naturally going to be in lower densities here, just because the habitat is naturally, lower quality. And then that also changes, especially with fires here. We have this, our habitat is always kind of turning over. An area might be like nice lynx habitat, old growth, and then it'll burn, and then it won't be good habitat, and then it'll be good habitat again when it's thick and young, and then it might stop being good habitat for a little while, and then once it's mature again, maybe it is. So I think it's hard to take a really good, like a snapshot in time. I guess I don't have an answer for an optimal number of lynx.
Right. So we talked a little bit about, and you showed how you're using the multiple cameras to take the photographs. Are the markings symmetrical? I.e., if you have one on one side, do you expect to see it on the other? Is there anything like that helps you identify the animals?
No, so they'll have different markings on one side as they do on the other. So, hopefully if they walk by both cameras, sometimes you get this perfect picture on one camera, like, oh yeah, you can see the markings. And then the other camera, you just see a lynx butt because it's just like walked out of the woods on that camera. And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Does AI going to help you, do you think, in those ways? Can they do some measurements, or is there something that you think might be in the AI basket this year?
I think not this year for us. We're just going to use AI to help sort our images into nothing detected, people, and animal, and then we'll sort all the animals by hand. But I have heard people talking about trying to use AI to identify, I forget what species, something probably more like tigers or leopards that just have a lot of spots or a lot of stripes. So people are working on that, at least for other species. So maybe someday.
Yeah, no, that's super, super interesting how we're, quickly, again, going back to Wolverine Way, right? From building these log things and putting bait in them and having Dan Savage come out and put in a transmitter to photo traps and AI. It's really interesting how this is progressing. And you're at an interesting, kind of tipping point in that. It must be interesting, even in your own research, to go from no AI and having the frustration of another leaf falling in front of the camera to now being able to have AI help you. It's pretty amazing within one study to have that happen.
Yeah, no, I'm optimistic that it will help quite a bit.
So we've still got a few minutes before we expire here. Feel free to just, shout out questions. Don't be shy, or go ahead and type those into the chat. And we're really just so delighted again, Alissa, that you are with us. And I hope that folks who are with us tonight will join us for the future events. We are really excited that in September, Rose Bear Don't Walk is going to be with us, one of the great new voices in the Native America Speaks program, and a very important voice in Montana is going to be with us. I think actually Rose is on with us tonight. Thank you for joining us. And then we will be doing a Dark Skies with Lee Rademacher, who's the park ranger, doing Dark Skies in October, and then we'll spend an evening with the superintendent in November. So that's going to be.
Hey Doug, what's a predator shield?
What's a predator shield, Alissa? That's my friend Bill Payne.
Hi, Bill. So this is where the idea that there are predators are less willing to be around people, and prey realize that, and so prey will actually hang around people because then they're safer from predators. So this was actually something that there was a mountain goat study a couple years ago done where they collared a bunch of mountain goats, and they actually have evidence of this. There was, the goats are all hanging out around Logan Pass, right? And there was one of the fires, maybe it was the Sperry fire, they closed Logan Pass, and so there weren't a ton of people anymore, and the mountain goats they found actually went back to their normal habitats near cliffs because there weren't people around to scare away the predators. So that could be happening with other, ungulates, potentially.
Yeah, that's super, super interesting. So what do you, as you finishing up this year, you're going to be here still for another few weeks anyway, what are your learnings from this year that are going to educate what you're going to do next year?
Well, next year we really just kind of want to fill in those blank spots on our map. We just really want to make sure we survey all the areas, that we can, and, get into all these different unique areas of Glacier. I think this year was kind of our big experimental year, being the middle year. We have, we couldn't have done the density work next year. We talked about this with the east side closure, we couldn't have done it because we wouldn't have time to actually analyze that data and still graduate on time. So next year's really just finishing up the occupancy stuff.
So Gary Shea asks about if you have any idea of the survival rate of newborn lynx.
That's a great question. I don't know that statistic. There's been a lot of studies down in Sealy done on lynx, and they probably, they've checked in on some, done some den sites and stuff. They might have an estimate of that. I don't know what that is. I can tell you the most common cause of death of an adult lynx is actually starvation. The second leading cause of adult lynx is being killed by a mountain lion. At least that's around here.
And do they live with their mate? And how long do they live with offspring?
They don't live with their mate. They meet up during breeding season just to breed. The offspring, let's see, they're born in May and June, I think, somewhere in there, and they'll stick around for, a year. Do they stick around for more than a year? This is a good question. I should probably know that. I got, these little facts. They're definitely with their mother throughout that next winter. And yeah.
And you mentioned that you're going to have that unique opportunity both from 2019 to 2020, recreation to no recreation, and perhaps no recreation to recreation again in 2021. Are there previous studies that show the impact of recreation on lynx? Is that a concern? Is that one of the issues that is put them on the threatened species list?
It wasn't one of the reasons why they were listed as threatened. I think it's a concern just with, recreation is growing in general. The recreation industry is growing and the tools are growing. So there is actually a really interesting study done recently in Colorado. Lucretia Olson was the main author on that. And they had a bunch of collared lynx. And this was in an area near Vail Ski Resort. And so what they looked at is, there's a ski resort, but then there's also this huge increase in backcountry skiing as well as snowmobiling. And so there's back skiing and snowmobiling happening on roads and then also happening dispersed, people are going everywhere. And they did they overlapped, they gave skiers and snowmobilers GPS units during the day. And then they compared that with the collar data and where all the lynx went. And they did find that, trying to remember exactly, lynx I think they adjusted their movement patterns somewhat to where recreation was, but they didn't completely avoid, they avoided the ski resort, but they didn't completely avoid, where their dispersed recreation was, but it was impacting their movement to some degree. So I just think as this is increasing to grow, it's something we need to think about.
Right. So two connected questions. How are the lynx doing in Canada, and has there been any studies similar to yours in the Waterton portion of Waterton Glacier Peace Park?
So Canada considers lynx to be doing fine. Alaska also, the populations are considered to be doing fine. There have been these sort of climate studies where they predict how climate change is going to change habitats. And there are predictions that their habitat will shrink and fragment even into Canada, where their populations are currently doing fine. But currently, there is trapping for lynx in Alaska and parts of Canada because they are, doing good in those areas. Sorry, what was the second
Waterton.
question?
Has there been a similar study in Waterton?
So Waterton has an array of camera traps out at all times, actually. And they are very generous with their data, and we're hoping to be able to incorporate data from Waterton camera data into our study to look at a transboundary occupancy. That's our hope. They've like, yeah, of course you can use, our camera data. We haven't quite got there yet. That's where the computer magic and statistic magic has to like pair up, how we collect our data and how they collect their data. But hopefully we will incorporate that.
And speaking of generous with data, since you're getting all of these other photographs, are you able to, does the research allow you to share that with other experts in the field who may be wanting to look at other studies on other groups?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing with camera data is you get so much data. I'm certainly, like I give it all to the Park Service and they'll have it forever and can use it, for anything they want. And I've talked a little bit with some of the people at University of Montana who are studying visitor use at potentially collaborating to look at some of the visitor use impact stuff with wildlife as well.
Yeah, it's exciting. I had a chance to talk with John Waller a little bit about it, and they seems to be piquing their interest about this might spur other conversations about additional research, because there might be some surprises in these findings about where certain animals are. As you mentioned, there are some findings here about where they are that are surprising, and so it may pique some curiosity. And I know that with the size of this group tonight, and again, thanks to everybody for tuning in on a Wednesday evening and spending some time with us, and none of this would have happened without you, so thank you for that. We may be hearing more about this, which we definitely want to do in the future, because these are the kinds of studies that are really important for this public-private partnership, right? We have an educational institution, a national park, and a nonprofit who have all come together to do something that for any of the three of us wouldn't be possible. And that's the power of community. And so thank you for being a part of this community, Alissa, and thanks to all the folks who joined us tonight. Any other kind of last questions? I want to be respectful of everybody's time, including Alissa's. So yeah, we're getting people, thanks from North Carolina and thanks from all over the United States. So it's really exciting to be able to spend time with you, Alissa, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Doug.
All right, with that, everyone, thank you very much. Everybody be safe, have a great evening, and we'll be back at it September 16th, I believe, with Rose Bear Don't Walk. That is one that's going to be very, very special. And in the meantime, if you see a Lynx camera, make a nice wave, and you'll be in the movies. Thanks again for all your help, and have a great evening.